because I'm such a frequent patron of my local library, I was able to pull some strings and get my hands on Djallar's book of Norse myths once again. And because it is a library book, you know it's got those godlike crinkle sounds. So last time we were talking about Ragnarok, which I think is essentially the end. It's the Armageddon, the apocalypse, the revelation of Norse mythology. And of course I did it because I felt it was relevant at the time with the movie that just came out by the same name. So let's swing to the other end of the pendulum. And I don't know why I just pulled when I said that. And talk about the origins of the gods, and I guess giants. Giants play a big role in Norse mythology. So let's find out what this book has to say about the creation myths of the Norse people. And, obviously I enjoy myths as much as clearly you guys do as well. But one of the things that particularly drew me to this book was just how many drawings, how many illustrations, hand-drawn, obviously, illustrations it's packed full of. And this book was written in 1967. So we have all the gods right there. And even some giants in the background. We have the Thor and Odin right in the foreground. And even actually before that title page drawing of all the characters of Norse mythology, we have a worldview, which I thought was worth a peek. Unfortunately, the inside dust jacket flap covers the left half of it, but nonetheless, it's something so primal about a tree, the worldview depicted as a tree. Interestingly, Gimli represents the high heavens. Gimli was one of the most noble dwarfs you guys all know from Lord of the Rings. And J.R.R. Tolkien was certainly a very well versed, very knowledgeable in Norse mythology. So maybe we'll reference back to this picture at some point. Alright, let's begin. Okay. So it starts off with an introduction. It's just a quick page I'll read through. To give us a little bit of context and background on the historical narrative of the Norse people. When the last ice age came to an end, The great glaciers that capped northern Europe had melted, uncovering a barren and rugged landscape. On the heels of the withdrawing ice came reindeer, wolves, bears, and foxes. They were pursued by hunters. These men were forever struggling against frost giants, the cold-hearted spirits of the mountains and the glaciers. But they found shelter in the valleys, where meadows grew lush and forests grew deep and dense. For thousands of years, the beasts and the men who hunted them roamed throughout the north. Then from the east burst a tribe of fierce horsemen. They stormed westward, settling new lands as they went. Led by a hulking, one-eyed chieftain, they spurred their horses on, until at long last they were stopped by the crashing waves of the North Sea. They could go no further, so they settled and made the land theirs. Life in the north was hard for these new settlers. The frost giants sent bitter storms howling down from the mountains. Wild beasts, trolls, and evil spirits lurked in the pathless forests, and cruel mermaids wrecked their ships. But the settlers were tough. They were protected by their own gods, the Aesir, who had come with them from the faraway lands. First among these Aesir gods was Odin, ruler of gods and men. His realm was made up of 9 worlds: the world of the dead, of fire, of gnomes, of men, of giants, of elves, of the Vanir gods, of the Aesir gods, of the world with the roof of glittering stars, where all good souls would one day meet. Through all these 9 worlds grew the ash tree, Yggdrasil. Only as long as this tree flourished was the reign of the Aesir fated to last. Like plants, beasts, and men, the Aesir gods too, one day must die. 1,000 years ago, Christianity conquered the north. The Aesir gods perished. They met their destiny on the day of Ragnarok, when they and the monsters of the mountains and the glaciers destroyed each other. Soon they were almost forgotten in most of the lands where they had once been worshipped. All that remained of them were fragments in folklore and a few of their names that had been given to the days of the week. Tuesday is named for Tyr, ancient god of the sword. Wednesday is Odin's day. Thursday is Thor's. Friday is the day of Freya, goddess of love. Though the Dutch, Germans, Franks, and Saxons forgot these old gods and their battles with the Ice Age monsters, the Norse did not. Through the long winter nights, Norsemen young and old would gather around their smoky fires in their long halls to hear stories and songs of their bards. To keep the trolls and giants away, they used to paint Thor's hammer on their barn doors, and the dragon's head that they carved on their church portals were there to frighten away the heathen spirits. To this very day, in lonely valleys, the people may tell of the meetings of trolls and gnomes and of other strange creatures of the past. On the outlying islands of Iceland, where volcanoes and glaciers stand side by side, the memory of the ancient Aesir gods was kept alive longer than anywhere else. passed on word by word from father to son. These stories were at last written down in 2 books, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. The Poetic Edda is a collection of Old Norse verse, set down in the 10th and 11th centuries. The Prose Edda, a collection of myths and fanciful tales, was written by Snorri Sturluson about the year 1200. From these 2 great Icelandic books, and from the scattered folklore and songs, we know today how the ancient Norsemen thought the world of their ancestors was created, how it flourished, and how it came to an end. And here you can see the picture of one of the famous horns. I forget what those are called, but one of the famous horns that were actually one of the first instruments. I think it was the first known, I don't know why I'm looking at the microphone, the first known instrument found in Scandinavia. Very neat. So, the first gods and giants. Early in the morning of time, there was no sand, no grass, no lapping wave. There was no earth, no sun, no moon, no stars. There was Niflheim, a waste of frozen fog, and the Muspelheim, a place of raging flames. And in between the fog and the fire, there was a gaping pit, the Ginnungagap. For untold ages, crackling embers from the Muspelheim and crystals of ice from the Niflheim whirled around in the dark and dismal pit. And here we have a depiction of this whirling around. I really do love all these drawings. So cool. As they whirled together, faster and faster, fire kindled a spark of life. A spark of life within the ice. An enormous ugly shape rose roaring from the Ginnungagap. It was the frost giant Ymir, first of the race of the Jotuns. At his side was a hornless ice cow that came mooing from the pit. We can see Ymir in his hornless ice cow mooing from the pit. Together, Jotun and cow, they lived on the rim of Ginnungagap. The Jotun did not lack food. 4 rivers of snow-white froth flowed like milk from the huge ice cow's udder. And Ymir drank and drank and grew to a towering height. As for the cow, she found plenty of food, licking the salty brim of Ginnungagap. So I guess these whirls might be the icy froth, milk flowing from her udders. And this, I guess, might be the salty brim of Ginnungagap that she's licking. for a long time there were only Ymir and the cow. Then Ymir fell into a deep, deep sleep. And while he slept, a male and a female Jotun came to life in the warmth of his left armpit, and a troll with 6 heads sprouted from his feet. These monstrous creatures grew quickly and had offspring of their own. They were all big and rough, and Ymir was the biggest and wildest of them all. The ice cow had also brought forth life. As she licked and licked, her tongue grew warm, for she had to lick hard enough to make enough food for Ymir and his brood. Then, under her warm tongue, a head of hair sprouted on the briny brim, and as she went on licking, a face appeared. God, that is such an interesting story. Like, it really does make so much sense that the offspring of Ymir and the cow, the ice cow, would be brought forth through heat in such an icy environment. So we have Ymir, this 6-headed troll, and the 2 new male and female Jotuns popping out of his warm left armpit. And then here's the cow licking the salty brim until his warm tongue manifested a face out of the ground. So the cow went right on licking. Shoulders and chest came forth, then legs, and at last outstepped a whole new creature. He was straight and quite handsome, not ugly like the Jotuns and the trolls. He had a son who was even more handsome, and the son took for his wife a beautiful Jotun maiden. For it sometimes happened that an ugly frost giant would have a lovely daughter. She bore her husband 3 sons. And these sons were so fair that a radiance spread from them and lit up the darkness around them. They were the first of the great Aesir gods. Their names were Odin, Honir, and Ludir. Spirit, will, and warmth. They were high and very holy, and they had the power to create a world. But before they could create the world in their own image, they had to get rid of the frost giant Ymir. He had always been wild, and old age had made him worse. So the 3 young Aesir gods went against the old Jotun. And we have Ymir here. And over here we have the 3 gods, Odin, Honir, and Ludir. And down here we have them fighting. And this is actually a really cool picture. I like this. It's like you notice in the background too, some, I don't know whether they're his minions or people, other Jotuns he might be holding captive. I'm not really sure. So, Odin, Honir, and Luder slew Ymir and pushed his huge hulk into the Gninga Gap. So too much brine flowed from his wounds that it filled the pit and flooded over the rim. The cow and all of Ymir's offspring were drowned too, except for two. A very strong Jotun and his mate. They clambered up onto the ice floes and went to live out on the outer shores, the wild outer shores of the sea made by Ymir's brine. The Aesir did not pursue them, and almost right away, this icebound wilderness, Jotunheim, was teeming with their offspring. These uncouth Jotuns and trolls hated the Aesir for what they had done to their kinsmen. They watched as the handsome gods made a new world and raged among themselves. So I guess here at last, this last illustration here is the three Aesir, Odin, Honir, and Luder, pushing the final foot of big, giant, old, gargantuan, primitive Ymir into the depths of Ginnunga Gap. You can see the rest of the Jotuns and the trolls and giants clinging on for dear life onto the big glacial ice floes in the background. So that was the precursor to the creation of the world, which is what we're going to read next time. I think I'll leave it here and I'll see what you guys think about these myths. I think they're fascinating. I think part of that's probably because my ancestry is Swedish, I believe, and some British. So it's interesting to me to learn about my own heritage, even if I don't know anybody who still lives over there. So thanks for watching, guys. Glad you guys like these myths, because it's just fun for me to dive into them really blindly and kind of learn as I go. So thanks again, guys, and have a great night.